owner of Richardson Insurance and your president of the Hanover Chamber of Commerce. We're delighted to see you guys all here this morning, and we appreciate you being here. Your presence shows a shared commitment for the future of our town, and it is my honor to once again kick off this event with you. As a chamber, we look forward to this event each year when we can collaborate with the town hall and the town departments to discuss and celebrate the many things going on in Hanover. Our purpose is to give you a comprehensive update on the town's progress and hear about future plans. We've seen you here the last few years in June, but we thought it would be a better idea to bring together everybody a little bit early with the upcoming town meeting, election, and the changes we've been presented with as a town. We've come a long way in the past year. We've faced challenges, some expected, some not. Today you're going to get an in-depth presentation from our speakers on the fiscal year 2026 budget forecasts, and the potential impacts on town and school services and programs based on the outcome of the override proposal before voters at the annual town meeting and town elections in May. You'll have the opportunity to engage in a question and answer session with any of the speakers you will see here this morning, as well as our police chief, fire chief, and any other town department that's represented here today. So please use this opportunity to ask any questions that you came here with. The speakers this morning are here with the purpose of being informative and transparent. This morning is a reflection and a roadmap to see where we're headed together. I'd like to take just a few minutes and mention that in just a few short weeks, we're going to be right back here in this room on Wednesday, May 14th, for our annual Hanover Business of the Year Award Dinner. This event is not just for business owners, it's a community event. So we would like to invite you all to come and support the people who work hard each and every day to make the Hanover business community thrive. During the event, we're going to be highlighting and awarding several businesses for their contributions to the town, and we'll announce for the first time Hanover's 2025 Business of the Year winner. For the first time in the history of the event, we're also going to be awarding thousands of dollars in grant money to provide growth and improvement opportunities to Hanover businesses. For my business owners in the room here today, please use this opportunity to apply. The goal with the grant money is to assist in transformative projects and provide resources to businesses in town who need them. The grants will remain a surprise until the night of the dinner, and we're very excited for this edition. I invite all of you to come, meet the owners of your local businesses, hear their stories, and celebrate with us. Also, as part of our awards dinner, we invite the Hanover Chamber High School scholarship winners and their families. Students from both the Hanover High and South Shore Vo-Tech will be recognized, and dinner will be provided by the South Shore Culinary Department. The night's full of fun, opportunity, and surprises. If this sounds like a night out that you're interested in, we are actually raffling off one free ticket to the event back on Erica's table. So please go back there and put in your business card or write down your name. And before the event ends this morning, we're going to be pulling a winner for that. So drop your name in and join us, please. I just want to jump in and recognize some of the great people that make this event a success every year. First, all of our thanks to you in this room for your community spirit and the positive contributions you make to our town. Thank you to our upcoming speakers, Janet Tierney, Ann Lee, Julie Burke, and Francie Donahue. I want to thank you for your continued collaboration. My Chamber Board of Directors who are here this morning, Chamber Vice President V. Murphy from Lamachia Realty, Josh Donovan from South Shore Checks and Printing, Jason Factor, Movement Mortgage, Kevin Dyer, AP Insurance, Scott Clifford, Lipstein Clifford, Janet Pistone from Jack Conway, Tom Osuch from Rockland Trust, and Dan Berry, our Treasurer and YMCA Director. I'd like to welcome and thank South Shore Chamber President Tim Cahill and our affiliate partners at the South Shore Chamber of Commerce, Steve Ryerson, cameraman and audiovisual extraordinaire, Crossroads Cafe, Lipsy Clifford, sponsor of the South Shore Cocktails and Mimosas, please help yourself, Foxgloves and Ferns for the flower arrangements on the table. All of our Hanover business owners here this morning, our town department heads, our police chief, fire chief, Senator Keenan, and Representative Dave DeCoste. And of course, our annual supporters and 2025 chamber sponsors, anchor sponsors Empowering Athletes, Lipsy Clifford, South Shore Bank, and Richardson Insurance, partner sponsors AP Insurance and Elliott Physical Therapy, and associate sponsors Elements Massage and Renovisions. Our gratitude and thanks to Dan, Ashley, Michelle, the entire team at the YMCA for having us here this morning. And with that being said, I'd like to welcome President of the South Shore YMCA, Trevor Williams.
Pleasure to be back here. What feels like a couple months ago, but it's actually been just about a year to welcome you to the South Shore YMCA Emerson branch, and specifically the Laura Center for the Arts. Thank you, Erin, for the kind introduction. My name is Trevor Williams. I'm the president of the South Shore YMCA. It's our pleasure to host this event every year, and the State of the Town Breakfast is such an honor to have you all here with us, so thank you for coming. I want to thank Erin and her whole team at the Chamber for allowing me just to greet you this morning and say a few words. Last year, at this point, I wanted to give the audience a little bit of a broad spectrum of what the Y does. And I had a lot of really great follow-up conversations from people saying, geez, I didn't know the Y did all that. And didn't know we were involved in so many things. But this year, I thought rather than talk about statistics and things, I would just tell you a story of community impact. We tend to call them mission moments at the Y. And the story just happens to be really pertinent to Hanover. There's so many stories, but I figured this one would be a real good one that would resonate with you, the audience. So the story starts like this. Last July 10th, the town manager, Joe, wrote Dan Berry, the vice president of Emerson Operations, who's right over here, wrote him an email and said, there's a police officer in the community of Hanover who was injured on the job, and he's going to require rehabilitation in order to get back to work, and we're just talking to the community about support for him. What started as an email to Dan resulted in, like a day or two later, that officer and his family, including 2 young children, being YMCA family members, using the Outdoor Aquatic Center. This was, of course, July, and with the kids enrolled in summer camp. And this was all made possible, of course, because that's what the Y is here to do. The Y is here to support the community. And not just from a financial standpoint, regardless of people's ability to pay or not pay for the YMCA services, but also from a circumstantial and needs base. We spend a lot of time with folks on what we call letters of hardship, or something that's come up in their life, whether they've had a fire or some kind of tragedy in the family. And so this was a pleasure for us to do. This took place really quickly, and I think we made a pretty big impact on this family's life. And in August, late August, the officer wrote Dan an email, and I just thought I'd read a little bit of it to you. She said, "Dear Dan, I just wanted to shoot you guys an email to say thank you so much for your hospitality. My kids had an absolute ball at camp and came home exhausted every day, making my life way easier. The whole staff was amazing, welcoming from the first minute. The way they treated both my kids actually had my wife and I questioning whether somehow they already knew my kids. I just can't say enough about your staff. The timing was also perfect, and I think the toughest part of my recovery and lack of mobility is finally over. We'll definitely be back next summer. We're also both planning on getting back in to use the gym when the kids are back to school. Thank you so much. You guys are amazing." Right? So stories like that is why we do the work we do. Providing a small act of kindness to someone else in our community who could use a little bit of help remains to this day an absolute pleasure. That's why we get into this kind of work. And those are the kind of stories that we hope that resonate all across the Y. That's just one of thousands we'll have this year, but I thought I would take the opportunity this morning to share that one with you. Again, thank you, Erin, and thanks for the whole team for allowing me to welcome you to this morning, and I look forward to a fantastic program. It's now my honor to introduce the next speaker, Select Board Chair Vanessa.
Thank you all for being here this morning, and thank you to the Hanover Chamber of Commerce and Erin for inviting me to speak. I'm sure you're all very ready to have a different select board chairperson in front of you, maybe one that doesn't always bring her kids when it's 7:30 in the morning. But it's always a pleasure to be among people who care deeply about Hanover, its economy, and its future. I want to begin by acknowledging the recent decision by Hanover Select Board to increase the split tax rate, a proposal I supported. I recognize that it wasn't a universally popular move, and I know that the Chamber expressed opposition. All the same, I want to thank you for your advocacy. Even when we disagree, I respect the role that each of you plays in shaping Hanover's policy and protecting its business interests. The board's decision was not made lightly or without acknowledgement of its impacts or consequences. But I believe in leading with transparency, fairness, and an eye towards the future. The increased split tax rate was part of a broader effort to balance the burdens we all share, while maintaining the high-quality service our businesses and residents have come to expect. That said, the conversation is not over. I appreciate and respect the voices of Hanover's businesses in the ongoing balancing act between residential and commercial interests, perhaps more than ever as we come together to address the fiscal challenges before us. As everyone in this room knows, Hanover is again facing budget and levy limit override votes this spring. After last year's override failed, we regrouped, we took stock of what we heard from voters, we worked hard to find a compromise that acknowledged the valid concerns surrounding affordability and sustainability, and we made it a point to better explain the why behind the ask. Why kicking the can down the road doesn't serve Hanover or its residents or businesses. This override is about preserving what works: our schools, public safety, infrastructure, and community programming, all while positioning Hanover to move forward in a way that is both smart and sustainable. I know the word override triggers anxiety, especially in the business community. Rising costs of inflation and an uncertain economy are already challenging enough. But I also believe in the strength of our local economy, and that it's directly tied to the strength of its community. Think about the Hanover we want to be: a town with vibrant schools that attracts new families, with responsive emergency services, and with programs and public services that support our community. These are not just public services. They're blocks to the foundation that allows Hanover's businesses to thrive. The upcoming vote isn't about short-term fixes, it's about protecting our long-term vitality. And as business leaders, I know you understand better than anyone the need to invest in infrastructure before it crumbles, to retain talent before it walks out the door, and to plan not just for this fiscal year, but for 3-5 years down the line. So we expect you to ask questions as you have, but also to help us seek and find the answers. I believe in Hanover, and I believe that we are resilient. I believe that we can overcome challenges, and not by fighting against each other, but by finding our common ground, listening with curiosity, and leading with purpose. So I want to also share a few reasons to be hopeful. Despite its challenges, Hanover remains one of the South Shore's most desirable places to live and to work. New development is underway, as we see along the Route 53 corridor. Local businesses are innovating and adapting to the challenges that we as a community and as a nation are experiencing. And our town employees, from teachers to first responders to DPW crews, show up every day with pride and a commitment to doing their jobs well. That's something we should never take for granted. We've tried to make the override process as transparent and as inclusive as possible, and in the next month, you'll continue to hear from us to that end. I invite you to participate. Listen today, encourage friends, customers, and neighbors to attend one of our other forums, ask questions, share concerns, and bring ideas. So I've spoken at this event right before Joe enough times to know that I need to make a sports reference for it to really hit home. So please remember that Hanover is and has always been a town that punches above its weight. Why? Because we pull together when it matters the most. I know that the conversations haven't been easy, and it does not look like they're getting any easier. But I also know that they'll continue to be productive and respectful, because whatever is happening in the world around us, that is how we choose to do things here in Hanover. So I thank you for your time today, for your leadership in the business community, and for your ongoing commitment to making Hanover the best that it can be. Let's keep the conversation going, and let's work together towards a future that we can all be proud of. So thank you all very, very much. So I now have the opportunity to introduce the presentation of the fiscal year 2026 budget forecast, and potential impacts of the override proposal before the voters, that will come before voters at the annual town meeting in the May election. To do that, we have our town manager, Joe Colangelo, our budget director, Jim Hoyes, our superintendent of schools, Matt Ferron, our school director of finance and operations, Mike Coates.
just jump right into this. If folks who have been coming to this breakfast for a number of years, if you recall, actually the first time that the operational override was even uttered publicly was at this event 2 years ago when I started talking about this. So this has been a conversation that has been out there for years. I think the only thing different now is you're seeing a lot of other communities in the area that are also having similar conversations. But again, ours started 2 years ago at this breakfast. So this is not a new topic by any means. Okay. All right, this is a very brief presentation. So hopefully we'll get to questions pretty quick. But I just want to recap some efforts that we've made in the last number of years to find efficiencies and cost savings. And just to highlight a few of them, this is not an inclusive list or an exhaustive list, but we did regionalize our emergency 911 and dispatching services. So we used to do that in-house 5-6 years ago. It cost us roughly $700,000 a year in operating costs, plus millions of dollars in capital infrastructure investment to run our own dispatching 911 service. For the last 5-6 years, I don't remember exactly the date of the transition, we've moved to a regional center in Duxbury, and our annual operating costs for that have reduced. They're going to be about $500,000 when our grant fully comes away. So that's a big operational savings, not to mention the millions of dollars of capital infrastructures that we are no longer responsible for. We've reduced our full-time employees that are funded by the general fund operating budget by 18. That's a large number of town employees. That doesn't count school employees, just town employees across DPW, finance, police, fire, etc. 18 full-time employees. Those positions have been reduced. Transfer station has recently gone to an enterprise fund. That is something that was done to take pressure off the general fund operating budget. On a much smaller example, we are partnering, we have been for 5-6 years, again, with Pembroke on animal control services. So these are just some examples of what we've done over the last 5-7 years to find efficiencies and reduce costs. Quick recap of last year's override and the result. So it was roughly a $6 million override that was proposed. It was passed at town meeting. The spending plan was passed, and obviously the subsequent ballot vote was pretty soundly defeated. Therefore, we are operating under the non-override or base budget for this year. Some service impacts that resulted from that failed override attempt last year. So we eliminated a firefighter position. And not only did we have to eliminate a firefighter position, but because of the uncertainty of where the FY26 budget was headed under both the base and the override, when we had another vacancy that developed in September or so, we were unable to fill that one because there's no point in filling a firefighter position, sending that person to the fire academy for 6-7 months, and then find out later that you don't have the budget to support them moving forward. So as actually a result of the override, we were down to 2 firefighter positions for most of the year. I think we have someone going to the academy soon to fill one of those. The police department, actually, we were able to avoid reducing patrol strength. That was something that we thought was going to happen. However, in order to avoid reducing patrol strength, Chief Kane has started right now the process of the police station actually going dark and not having any civilian staff to welcome someone or to respond to a life and death emergency at the station. So in order to avoid service reductions, we are going to, and we're actively looking at closing the police department during certain times of the day. We moved our stormwater program to the water enterprise budget, which did help with the general fund, but it caused increases to your water rates on the other side. And then there was a number of, we've lost employees in our finance department. We had a number of retirees and also people who left Hanover for other finance departments in other towns. So our finance department took a big hit this past year. And certainly the school department leadership can talk if there are questions about what the impacts were to Hanover Public Schools as a result of the failed override this year. So this year's proposal, how's it different? We focused on affordability and sustainability. It was loud and clear. The ballot vote failed by 800 last year. It wasn't close. I don't think there was any thought to bring back the exact same or even a similar proposal to last year. You have to listen to voters. That's what they said. You've got to come back with something different, at least something different. On the affordability component, the proposal is over $2 million less than last year's proposal. The impact on the average residential taxpayer went from $1,200 a year in last year's proposal to under $400 for this year's proposal. So these are much more, this is a much more affordable option compared to last year. We listened to everyone, we heard you, we came back with something much different. The sustainability piece, we were unable to focus as much last year on forecasting and projecting. Something that we're able to do this year, especially with Mr. Boyce coming on board as the budget director, is really look at forecasting and projecting. Our goal is to make this override sustainable through the year 2032. Why 2032? In 2032, we have a number of large fixed costs, pension obligations, debt obligations that are falling off, which will create quite a bit of breathing room in our general fund budget. So we've looked at the forecasting. Certainly Mr. Boyce can talk more about it if there are questions. We're trying to make this sustainable, so we're not asking for voters again. I don't think anyone wants to ask to bring this forward again in the future, if we can avoid it, that this is a sustainable proposal. It's affordable, it's sustainable. And I would just say, ultimately this would be a select board decision, but I highly doubt any iteration of the select board is going to, if this fails this year, is going to recommend that we try again. I don't think that there's going to be any thought of a third bite at the apple. You try once, they say no. You try again, they say no. At that point, then you move on and start planning on not having an override in the near future. So I'm going to stop there. I'm going to hand this over to Mr. Ferron and Mr. Oates. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having us. This is Mike Oates. He's our Director of Finance. I'm Matt Ferron. I'm the Superintendent of Schools. And this morning, when I was looking at my phone, a picture popped up. It had to be 10 years ago at this event when I was over at the town hall. I had my son with me, who must have been 6 or 7 years old. And it kind of reminded me how long I've been doing this and how really all the experiences and how terrific this community has been. So we thank the business community, we thank the YMCA, thank you for having us today. We want to keep with the theme of affordability and sustainability. So as we look to the future, as we build our budgets for not only next year and the years beyond, we are really strategically planning for that. Last year, we lost 37 staff members, resulting in increased class size across the board. We lost a lot of opportunities for elective classes, AP classes. We have middle school students, excuse me, in study halls, not having opportunities for engineering classes and computer classes and art and music classes. So those things do still exist, but they're cut way back. And our teachers are working a lot harder, and our administrators are working a lot harder, and it's causing some real challenges for us. So what we're hoping to do moving forward, we have to be smart and consider both options. So between the select board and AdCom, they've made some recommendations about next year for our base budget and what the override budget would be. So just to put some priorities to that, right now at the elementary school, if the base budget is the one we're working with, we'll be able to hire a couple teachers back to increase class size slightly in 1 or 2 of our grades. So right now class size is in the upper 20s at our elementary schools, mid to upper 20s across the board, which is certainly not ideal. And if the override does pass, however, we will be able to restore enough classroom teachers to bring our class size back to more of an ideal level at in the very low 20s. So that would be great for our teachers, but more importantly for our students and their families. Children to learn optimal learning conditions, the low 20s is really where we want to be. At our middle school, our base budget would have some modest impact. We would be able to bring back 1 or 2 elective teachers to get 6th, 7th, and 8th graders out of downtime study halls, which is, we have wonderful kids and terrific staff supervising them, but it's a challenge and it's downtime. These kids should be in elective classes, they should be learning about engineering, they should be learning about entrepreneurship, they should be learning about art, and those are the opportunities that currently we don't have for them. At the high school level, with the base budget, it would be very modest. We'd be able to restore a couple of teaching positions that would really take the pressure off, really just a couple of areas. But with the override budget, that would really make a significant difference in bringing back or strengthening our program overall for all students with class size. It would allow us to restore a lot or even create a lot of new or some new elective positions. I learned yesterday that we have over 130 students who have signed up for accounting. And one of our major goals for the future is to build on our entrepreneurship programs, and we want to build a requirement for personal finance for kids that graduate from high school. So one of our goals for the next few years is to require all of our high school graduates to have taken a course in personal finance. English literature is fun, it's great. It's nice to learn about ancient civilizations, but learning, what better time in the world to learn about finance? How exciting a time it would, scary, but how exciting a time it would be to really learn real life world lessons. So those are the examples that we are really trying to focus on, and Mike and I are also looking at trying to find ways that whatever happens, that we're positioning ourselves for the next 1, 2, 3 years with maximizing whatever state aid opportunities come our way, and making sure that our students, one of our major cost drivers the last several years has been making sure our students with special needs have all the resources they need, and just to make sure those resources are secured. So we really appreciate your time and the support we've received from the community and the words of encouragement, regardless of the financial situation. We want to be an important part of the pride of this community. We want to be a very critical and important part of the brand of 02339. We want to be an important part of complementing the business community and the real estate community and the amazing things that go on in Hanover. And just with one last thought, last week we learned one of our student athletes, a senior, was diagnosed with lymphoma. And in typical Hanover fashion, within 24 hours, there was dozens, if not far more people waiting to send this young man off as he went to begin his treatment. And his fundraiser has raised tens of thousands of dollars. And just the amount of people in this room who have stepped up to support this young man and his family is inspiring. So that's what this community does. We want to have an excellent school system. We want to be a leader on the South Shore. We want to be a leader in Massachusetts. So your support is greatly needed and greatly appreciated. And we thank you very much. So I have the opportunity to welcome, and I want to thank Jim Hoyes. Jim is in his, these are all the positions we would bring back if we could. Lots of teachers, some administrator support, but under the base budget would be the positions here in the blue, and under an override position, generally the positions. But I think it's important, Mike and I especially want to thank Jim. Jim has come on board and supported us tremendously. He's given us great insight. His experience in the business community has been really a great learning experience for us. So even when you get to be an old guy like myself, you can still learn, and we've learned a lot from Jim. So I'd like to introduce the Budget Director, Jim Hoyes.
was, it doesn't pay to be tall sometimes. There we go. Well, good morning, everyone. As Matt said, I'm Jim Boyes, and joined this odyssey as we're putting together the budgets in the fall. I've been a member of the advisory committee. It was in my 7th year, and so very much involved in the town finances as part of that role. But it became apparent that we really needed to start to look not just at decisions about the current fiscal year and the next fiscal year, but really starting to look at this on a multi-year basis. And that, as we know in business, as we know in our households, decisions that we make today don't just have implications for tomorrow. They have implications for the future into following years. And all these are choices and prioritizations and investment decisions that we make as a town on where we spend our tax dollars and what do we invest in. This also became apparent as we started to talk with our credit rating agencies, our bond agencies. And they were talking about a shift as well as they rated municipalities more on past audit performance and their ability to repay debt in the short term to wanting to see long-term forecasts. And by long-term forecasts, it's kind of a minimum of 3 years they were looking for, ideally 5. In our case, as Joe mentioned about fiscal year 30-32, we became really focused on running numbers through that period. So it's basically a 7-year forecast. As you look at the town finances, I think it's been covered on the impacts that citizens made in terms of the vote last year at the election on the override, the implications of that. If you look now going forward, the big picture doesn't change a lot. We have high fixed expenses that are driving this process and putting us in a tough bind, so to speak. And we have a diminished revenue stream coming in. If you look here, you can see that our revenue growth throughout the whole forecast period, even into the early 2030s, remains at really less than 3%. There's a couple of years it may bump up based on assumptions you're using, but by and large, it's highly constrained by our Prop 2.5 situation and the lack of new growth. We had a few years with some high new growth as Hanover Crossing came online, other development came online in the 53 corridor, but now we're really looking at a couple 100,000 in new growth, meaning new taxable properties coming online each year. So we're by and large stuck with the 2.5% increase as what we have to live with. The other situation is things like state aid, motor vehicle excise tax, which is a driver of revenues, aren't really expected to change much. And we know there's a lot of uncertainty at the state level in terms of what funding we'll make. I believe the House budget is coming out this week or next week. The governor's budget's out. Not a lot of big increases there. And we know there's a lot of uncertainty coming at the federal level, so I think it's prudent to forecast it at a very conservative level. But over 90% of our revenue comes from property tax and excise growth and state aid. So the other factors, although important, we played some of those levers, they really don't drive the big picture. An example of something that Joe didn't mention is that the town did is using some of the meals tax revenue, which has grown very nicely and was being included in paying for OPEB, other post-employment benefits, has now moved to the operating budget. So that's given us, in essence, a 2-year bump in additional expense money we had to invest in town departments, town services, et cetera. But now that's kind of capped because we still have to fund that liability in OPEB. If you look then at our our expense categories, the picture doesn't get much more exciting there either. It's a tough situation we're in. As these fixed expenses, which include not just things that were mentioned like the Plymouth County retirement, but healthcare premium increases, and I'm sure you're seeing this in your businesses, how that's going up, in some cases double digits. For the town, it's in high single digits. We have expenses that are related to debt. South Shore VOTEC, we have more students from Hanover enrolling in South Shore VOTEC. So we call these fixed costs. It doesn't mean they can't change at all, but they're not really in our control. Like, do we have a fire position or not? Do we have a position or not? Do we cut office expenses or not? So these are fixed expenses in our view. And they're growing at 8 to 10%. So already, if our revenues are capped in essence at 2.5 to 3, and you start running expense categories above that, It doesn't take much of a forecaster to realize we have an ongoing gap that we have to address. So the proposal is, making tough choices, and the vote would be on the base levy limit budget or the override budget, which gives us a better chance of sustainability. That's a decision in town meeting and a decision in ballot box. There's other factors that come into play here. And really I want to talk about the ones in the dotted box. I think the others are mentioned about impacts on schools and emergency responders, impacts that result from that, increased fees, whether that's the transfer station or additional fees in the school system for busing, athletic fees, et cetera. But these short-term decisions do come into play in the long term, because if we're using free cash, for example, that can limit what investment we make in the future on, do we repair and try and maintain something, which ultimately is going to need to be replaced anyway, or do we purchase it? Or do we take it on as debt? And we really don't want to be taking on debt, particularly for smaller priced items that historically we've been able to pay for with free cash. And so delaying capital investment, although not part of the operating budget, does have ramifications for the town. And then the other is that most of our expenses, quite frankly, are people who deliver great services out to our residents and businesses, whether that's in the building office with permitting, whether that's someone coming to pay their property tax, whether that's waiting for an ambulance call. But they're people, they're important people, and most are in collective bargaining agreements, and so those also have a certain rate that's negotiated and agreed to, and we have to pay. So we can't decide we're just suddenly going to have no salary increases for the fire department or something like that. So we really have boxed in guardrails of what we have to live with. So, not to go into the detail of each of these slides, there's more here for illustrative purposes, but the one just looks at a 3-year window of the line chart. You can see expenses are in the top line, and the bottom is revenue, so we have a gap. We think in the first 2 years, 3 years, we'll be able to address that gap with the use of free cash, excess levy capacity, expense management, and other moves that we can, if the override were to pass, we can, in essence, deal with that deficit. Quite frankly, by the time you get to fiscal year 31, depending on how everything plays out, you might need to dip into the stabilization fund, but we know the subsequent year we have a surplus, and so we can pay that back. But you really don't want to start going to the stabilization fund right now, because that's a tough situation. We'll never get that back. The other on the bottom is really this impact of these fixed costs. I don't expect you to be able to read this slide, but it's showing in the dark blue bar what the total increase from Prop 2.5 levy limit would be. The other bar is showing how much of that gets eaten by those fixed costs. And that's about 80% of what we have each year to be able to invest back in the town is gone right off to things like the Plymouth County retirement. And so it doesn't leave much room for anything to be sustainable, and certainly not for any new services to be added to the town. So this is the dilemma we're in, and this is the choice, and why the select board has put forward the override option again. There's been a lot of budgeting work between the town manager budget and the advisory committee budget to get us, I think, to the best spot to present two choices, and that's what we'll need to move going forward. So with that, I'll turn things back to Joe, and thank you.
Okay, I guess I'm looking, I don't see Erin, but unless she drags me, are you going to do the question? Okay. Erin will moderate the questions, and besides the four of us up here, there are various town department heads and other staff members who, depending on the detail of the question, should be able to jump up and help provide some answer to the extent we can.
All right, thank you so much to all of our presenters. We do have a microphone right here, Jason's holding, so if you have a question, this is the very informal part of the morning. There was a presentation with the HYAA, and there was 45 minutes of question and answer, so I invite you guys to ask anything that you're looking for an answer to today. Do we want to bring Vanessa back? So, does anybody want to kick us off?
I already have the microphone, so I'll pick us up.
Sure.
The mechanism for the upcoming votes and the override, the key dates and things that residents need to know, what are we voting for at town meeting versus what's going to be on the ballot?
It's a great question. So you have to forgive me. Thinking off the top of my head, I don't remember the exact date, so someone can correct me. But the first Monday evening in May, is that May 3rd? Could be May 3rd. 5th? There you go. That is, so annual town meeting, just like last year and the other year, is the legislative body of the town. And town meeting votes on a spending budget. So town meeting, like last year, this year will consider a likely vote on both a base, a non-override budget, and an override budget. So that's step one. So let's just pretend here that the override budget, or some variation of it, is passed at town meeting on May 5th, you're telling me. Then the second action, you might have to correct me on the date again, Kathy, but I believe is Saturday, May 17th. Saturday, May 17th is the ballot vote for the override question, which will ask voters here if you would like to increase the levy by the $3.7 million number. So if the override budget, spending budget passes at town meeting and that ballot vote passed, then the override budget would be effective come July 1st. If, like last year, the override budget is approved at the floor of town meeting, but the ballot vote fails, we would revert to the base budget, or a budget that's within the current levy limit.
Hi, Lisa Adams, I live in Hanover. Since the school budget is such a large line item, and last year when we went through the override, people just have a lot of questions about it. Is it possible to have a town meeting on just the school budget? Since it was an all or nothing line item, and I myself would like to see more details than just, $3 million.
Okay. So, and Pete or Matt could correct me if I say something here that I misstate, but at town meeting, the spending budget, there is one, you'll see the town departments, police, fire, broken up between salaries and expenditures, blah, blah, blah. The school department has one lump sum. I believe that's a state law. That is one lump sum, not broken up the same way on the spending budget. So that's not just a Hanover function or anything. That is a state law, I believe. In terms of the request on the ballot, I think the question is, could the ballot read something, I'm making up numbers here, $1 million for public safety, increase the levy, $1 million for the schools, increase the levy. Yes, theoretically, the ballot could be written in different ways than it's written currently. Right now, it is written that it doesn't pigeonhole the increased levy to any department or any function. That's the way the ballot is written, just the way it was written last year.
So, no, not necessarily the ballot itself. I'm just saying, we had this meeting to discuss the line items, of the budget. And so I'm actually asking for another town meeting where the citizens can kind of look at the school budget before it goes to before we vote.
Thank you, Mrs. Adams. If you go on our website, on our budget page, the school committee voted a budget in January. Now, that's not the budget that's going to go forward either for the base or the override budget. All that work has been done since then. But in that budget is a line item detailed budget that has all of the different cost centers. So you can look right in there and there's a couple hundred lines in what it is for textbooks at Cedar School, what the teachers are at Center School, what my salary is, what the paper, the supply lines at each of the schools. So if you want to go line by line, that opportunity does exist. That budget is available publicly on our website. And as always, if you ever want to just call and come in and visit us, we're happy to sit down with anybody and go over any particular questions or areas of the budget you might have questions about.
How you doing? Nick Spalzino, 26 Honeysuckle Lane. I just want to know, is there any more plans to raise the split on our business owners?
I'm not the right person to answer this question. But when you say, are there any more plans, I guess I'll just make sure that I'm clear on the mechanism. So the tax rate split is voted on every single year around Thanksgiving. It depends on when we get the information from the state that's required, but between Thanksgiving and maybe the first week in December, I'm looking at Elaine, our town assessor, that's typically when that vote takes place by the select board. And when I say by the select board is the one and the only body that makes that decision. They make that decision every single year, and it is something that they're required to make. So I can't predict what 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 select board members will do at any given year, but that question comes up every single year, and it has to be decided by the select board every single year.
Thank you, Vi Ryerson, Hanover resident. I think this is a question for our school superintendent. What Lisa was referring to, I believe, was more of a hearing where residents would have an opportunity to talk with the superintendent about specific line items and get a better understanding of your needs and your hopes for the future. I can't help but think that that would be helpful, and perhaps for the sake of transparency, if there were such a meeting open to the public in Hanover, where you could converse with people who have specific questions addressing salaries, for instance, which I believe are 80% of your school budget, and miscellaneous items, which I remember as a selectman being addressed as one line item and having us question more specifically what those breakdowns were. I think that would help, and I don't know if you have the time or the inclination to meet with people, but I get it. I get what Lisa Adams is trying to say, perhaps a hearing of some sort, as opposed to a quote-unquote town meeting. How open are you to that?
Well, thank you, Mrs. Ryerson. It's a great question. Well, tomorrow we have a noontime luncheon at the Council on Aging. Tomorrow night we have an open public forum that is going to be at Hanover High School, which will be broadcast on Zoom, and we'll have myself, Mr. Colangelo, Mr. Oates will be there to answer any questions that people have. People will be able to call in and ask questions. We're doing a very similar presentation following the Monday we get back from, well, schools come back from April vacation. It's the last Monday in April, I believe. And that won't be from Town Hall, but a very similar format. Open Q&A, brief presentation, available for any resident who wants to dial in on Zoom. For the last several months, every school committee meeting, we've been going over the budget, and those are welcome, those are public meetings. People are absolutely welcome to come to those, and they're all recorded and available to watch on HCTV. So, absolutely, I think tomorrow night is pretty much exactly what you're asking for, and we're happy to do it.
About 61 Old Bridge Road. Could you somebody talk a little bit about the energy choice program that's coming up? Is it involved, businesses be involved in that? What are the downsides? I know there's a meeting coming up that council involvement, maybe somebody could give us a just quick overview of why we're setting this up.
Yeah, I can answer very briefly. I think the best thing to do, we have a meeting, hearing at the Council on Aging tomorrow. We're doing the budget at noon, and then the municipal aggregation at 1, so that's probably a better way to do it, but just a quick recap. Actually, again, the legislative body, the town meeting, voted this in 2 years ago. So that's, I guess, the easy answer to why it's happening. Why did it take 2 years? Well, it took 2 years to get through the regulatory review process with the Department of Public Utilities, yada, yada, yada. It was a pretty long, intensive process to actually get ready to launch. But that's why we're here. In terms of the best place to get some detailed answers are going to be straight from our consultants, who are certainly much more versed in energy markets and how the program works than I would be able to provide answers for you here. But I guess to make it long and short, we're one of 150 or 200 municipalities that have implemented this type of program. Your energy rates will be guaranteed and fixed for the next 30 months at the 13 cents per kilowatt hour. So I guess that's the nuts and bolts answer. More detailed answers are better answered tomorrow at noon, or 1 o'clock, I should say. I believe so. I believe anyone who is on the standard plan currently, including a business, would be automatically enrolled.
Anything else?
Seems like an abnormally shy crowd this morning.
Anything for our school committee, town manager, select chair?
Nicole Craven, I'm a resident and business owner in the town. You spoke about the impacts that not passing an override would have to public safety in the schools. Can you highlight impacts to our senior services, library, any other impacts that we'll be having?
Well, it's a good question, and but I want to make it clear, because I think some other communities that might have not been as clear, so I want to make it crystal clear here. If the override does not pass, the impacts on the fiscal year 26 budget that starts on July 1st will be minimal, if not an enhancement, quite frankly, to the current year for Hanover Public Schools and for a few other departments. So if someone wants to focus just on the next fiscal year, the next fiscal year alone, and put blinders on to the forecasting work that Mr. Hoyes has done, the absolute affirmative answer is the results of the override not passing for the next fiscal year are minimal. Now, the results of the override not passing for services, assuming that another proposal doesn't come up, and like I said, I have a really hard time thinking that will be a third bite at the apple in the row. Still, I think at that point the voters have spoken, and we move on reducing services. The service reductions for them starting a year from now will be drastic. And I don't want to strike fear in anyone because I don't want anyone to hold me to say exactly what's going to happen. But things that will be on the table, and I know people are going to moan and groan, there will be reductions likely in Hanover Public Schools going back to where they are now at least. The services, and they can speak to that more than I can. Fire, police services absolutely will have to be curtailed. We can't keep up with increased fixed costs and our contractual obligation costs that are, 8-9% against our 3% revenue increases. I mean, the math is pretty simple, and it just doesn't work. Starting in fiscal year 27, these things are going to be cut. Yes, people have said there is a chance, and I think it'll be talked about, of drastically reducing, if not closing, the library. I think that that's an honest conversation, starting a year from now, not starting on July 1st. I think that's an honest conversation that would have to happen, along with a number of other services. Curtailing the hours of the COA. Actually, one of my original budgets for the base budget included reducing the library and reducing the COA, closing it on Friday. The reason that was taken back, and we tried to fund it this year, is because there's 15, 20 people that the COA takes to necessary medical appointments on Fridays. So I didn't want to have that reduced. But can I say definitively that starting in fiscal year 27, absent override, that sort of service cut wouldn't be on the table as one of the earlier cards to play? I think it would be. I do think it would be. There's only so many places we can realistically go. So again, this isn't fear-mongering, it's not doom and gloom. Just want to be honest that next year's budget, it's fine under the base scenario. It's the 27, 28, 29 that you're really going to see the reductions.
Karen Dayton, South Shore Bank. I was wondering if you guys have found out what your bond counsel is saying around future and current impacts to your bond rating. I've heard that using stabilization funds, dipping into your reserves is, and because Hanover's not the only town facing overrides and facing these cuts. As we know, a lot of state aid is, like you said, fixed. We don't know the certainty around what's going to happen with federal funding, and everybody is kind of facing the same situation. So overrides are on the table kind of across the board. So I was wondering, what do you see being the impacts to your bond rating if the override fails and you have to dip into your reserves?
Great question, and conversation certainly we were having with our bond counsel late fall, and then with our rating agency analysts, that just was mid-February, that we had in-depth calls to retain the Moody's rating we had, as well as get a very favorable interest rate on a bond anticipation note that we put forward. But you're right, they asked questions about what are you doing with free cash, what are you doing with your reserves, what are you doing with your stabilization funds. And that's why, first of all, on the stabilization fund, we're really not trying to use that at all. And in fact, there's a warrant article this year to even start replenishing, or not really replenishing, but adding to that stabilization fund. It's a modest amount proposed for this May meeting, but it was to start the conversation that these things are important. And we can't just forget about things like stabilization fund, and we certainly can't just go rate it and spend all that money in a year, because it certainly will come back to hurt us on our bond rating and give us higher interest rates when we do need to go to debt. So that conversation is occurring. The other is the free cash balance. We use some of that, although we'd love not to, but some is used in the operating budget to subsidize that loss. But you'd love to be able to keep that just for non-recurring expenses and for smaller purchases that you can avoid then adding debt. So last year, there were a number of items in the warrant in May of last year that went through as short-term debt, which historically, had we not had these financial difficulties, I'm sure would have been proposed first as straight-out purchases with free cash. But they didn't, and so they rolled into that bond anticipation note. So these are important factors. I don't think in the short term there's a big impact because we don't have a major debt that's coming out this year. The South Shore VOTEC new construction school is really debt that South Shore VOTEC will carry and the towns will pay their portion. So that's not really based on our bond rating. And the other big projects are not directly part of property taxes, but there's a proposal in the capital plan to look more deeply at PFAS mitigation out of the water enterprise. And so that could be a large debt, and a half a point or point difference on interest rates on a 20 or 30-year bond make a difference. So we certainly want to preserve the highest rating we can have as a town, and that's one of the factors that's built into the budget projections. Obviously, residents on town meeting floor can make other proposals, and we can't control that. But quite frankly, the decision that might be good for the short term, but is not good for the bond rating long term. But that's our government, and those are decisions that we made at that point.
Just another question. Have we looked into selling some of the 330-pound properties to close the budget gap?
I guess the easy answer is yes. So a few years ago, we put together a policy that kind of more formulated our, kind of put some structure around the way we're doing it. Actually, this year at town meeting is, at least since I've been here, I think our first time of actually trying to dispose of it. Well, we tried to dispose of Sylvester. I should backtrack that. But we do have an old fire station that's up for sale at this year's town meeting. So yes, it is something that we're looking at. I mean, I think by and large, a lot of our town properties are either in use or are not worth a lot. They're either landlocked or they don't really have much access to anything. But it is something that we're looking at, and something that, I think we've published all the town properties, and whether they're conservation land or parking lot rec land or whatever they are, on our website. So look at it, see if if there's other suggestions about this piece of property might have some value or use, industry or commercial or what have you.
All right, we'll take another couple of minutes here if anybody has anything.
Hello, B. Murphy, resident and jack of all trades in Hanover. More questions for me. It's gone from 1,200 per household to 400, correct? For the number? Okay, so the wording on the ballot, who controls that wording on the ballot?
The wording on the ballot is set by the select board.
Okay, is there any way, and don't kill me on here, but my fear is there's a big population in Hanover that's like at home doing their thing, not on Facebook watching the shenanigans. They show up to vote and they're assuming it's still the 1,200. Is there any way to just educate people that show up that day? Because sometimes there's questions in there that I'm reading that day too, I'm not gonna lie, that they may assume it's still 1,200. Because I think that's a big drop per household. I'm just trying to think of ways to educate those people when they first come to vote. Because
It's a fair question. So, I think, I shouldn't speak for our town council, but, I don't think we were able to add that sort of language into the warrant article itself. So we weren't able to. In terms of trying our best to explain the difference, forums like this, things that we put on our website, all the forums that we're doing between now and town meeting, potentially our town clerk can help answer the question about there are some guardrails that we or anyone has in terms of electioneering on the day of town elections or early voting. So I believe, yes, outside of 150 feet from the precinct, the high school, there's an opportunity for anyone to provide information on any topic they want. So yes, there is, but I don't believe, got these nodding at me, so I feel like I got the answer right. Within 150 feet or certainly inside the precinct itself, we would not have the opportunity to provide that exact piece of information. Is that right? Good job.
I can just add something to that, and this has been expressed on all the budget meetings as a build up to this. The numbers you see are for that mythical $770,000 home in Hanover. If you look at the way properties split out, about 2/3, I think it's 63%, of homeowners, property owners would face an increase less than that. And so whether it's state data from the Department of Revenue that you can look at online or from the town, they use this average price, but obviously there's a spread of home value. So I think that's important consideration as residents look at whether it's the levy limit tax increase or an override tax increase. You see a number like on the screen, but almost 2/3 of people will be actually impacted by this.
Jason Factor, 34 Briarwood Drive. I saw a lot of eyes and head nods when, Matt, when you mentioned the personal finance classes and initiatives to make that a graduation requirement. Can you speak to a little bit about what that curriculum might entail and the way maybe business owners could get involved in volunteership as lecturers or help create that curriculum for our students?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. It's actually nice to talk about something positive. I can't speak for the specifics of the curriculum, but there would be a lot about personal finance, managing credit, what is a mortgage, what does the stock market do, what is a mutual fund, what is a 401k, how to plan for state and federal taxes. So yes, we would love to have the business community be involved, and we've had offers in the past. We've had guest lecturers in the past, but that is something that we would love to partner with this group, with the chamber, with any business who's interested. And even now, if people want to, give us a call and say, hey, I have something that we think might be very interesting for your students to hear, we'll be very open. We're always open to guest speakers and guest lecturers, especially in the spring, when a little bit of spring fever sets in. But to have the kids hear and learn something new from a member of their community who they can look up to as somebody who's successful and aspire to do that as well. So that role modeling is also very important. We appreciate that. Really appreciate the question.
Don't forget Credit for Life.
Don't forget Credit for Life. Yeah, the Credit for Life Fair is coming up, actually. Yeah, so Credit for Life is an event we do every year at the high school, where we partner with banks and our teachers and a lot of community partners, a lot of people from this room come in and work with our kids and guide them and give them advice about buying a car or a credit card or how much you're going to pay for concert tickets. And they're assigned a profession, and it's a great day, and the kids absolutely love it. And I think that's really what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to create smart, engaged citizens, entrepreneurs, future business leaders, and 10 years from now, fast forward, we want a lot of our students in this room representing the business community of Hanover and the South Shore. Yeah, our county teacher, Stacy Pereira, and their partner, Brian Chicolo, are just really exceptional. And that's, part of the reason when you have great teachers like that, that's why you have classes that are so over-enrolled. Nearly a quarter of our students are trying to take those classes. So it's no secret that Hanover is a very business-oriented community. A lot of our students go on to college to study finance and business and marketing, and nonprofit management and healthcare administration and management. So anything we can do to partner with this group to give our kids a leg up is really something we're very interested in. So thank you for raising it. Appreciate it.
Hello, Josh Donovan, business owner and resident here in town. Jim, you said that 2/3 of the homes approximately would be under that $400 or 400-ish. Does the town still have that page that they had last year where you can go on there and actually put in your address and see what your taxes will be or what the increase will be if the override passes?
Yes, it's not up and running as we're sitting here right now, but the intention, I think it's this week or early next week, that will be up where you can enter your address and it will give you the increase. The matter was trying to make it simple and kind of deciding which budget is the one showing the projection off of, because there's the town manager submitted budgets, there's the AdCom recommended, and so we want to make sure it's clear to residents what's in the base levy limit increases and then what would be the override impact. But yes, I think it's an important tool. Many towns have that, and we will be running that ourselves.
Hi, Ryerson. I have one more question regarding state funding. In this particular year where we've had so many impacts that we couldn't control regarding the state budget, do any of our departments feel that there will be bereft of funding, that we will get any of the funding that has been proposed as in regard to housing or any of that? Could we address that here? how are we standing as far as the school funding is concerned from the state? Is there hope? I remember back when that sort of fell flat, especially with the threat of a recession. Thank you.
Great question. In terms of state aid, the school department, we get really two forms of state aid. We get Chapter 70 state aid funding, which is about $7.5 million. And then we receive circuit breaker funding, and that's reimbursement for extraordinary special education costs. And this year we received almost $1.5 million in circuit breaker funding because we've had some very high costs associated with students with special needs. That just gets spent. The Chapter 70 money, that's spent immediately. That actually just goes to the town as a revenue source for the town. The circuit breaker funding we control, but that's, again, pretty much immediately spent. We are trying to strategically roll forward some circuit breaker funding into future fiscal years to help protect against unknown extraordinary costs. In the past, many of you may remember, we've had to tap into a reserve account, a special education reserve account that's been set up by the town. And in some years, we've had to exhaust that entire account. So we're not in that position right now, but we're not expecting any additional, state aid, and we are remaining optimistic that our federal aid, which is about $800,000 in Title I and IDEA funding, we're anticipating that coming in as predicted, but we're in an unstable situation and unpredictable. But if that changes, then we have a problem, or a whole different problem. But we're anticipating, our Chapter 70, our circuit breaker, and our federal aid to at least be in line with what we budgeted for and what we have in line in our projections for next year and hopefully the years beyond.
And looking at our state aid, our preliminary figures are lower this year. Our minimum aid per student is lower than what our numbers were last year, but our preliminary numbers are higher than last year's preliminary numbers. So we're anticipating that our state aid, our minimum aid per student, will be at or above what we received last year.
All right. Well, thank you guys all very much for coming. Thank you to our speakers who came prepared and answered our questions this morning. Hanover is where we live, it's where we work, it's where we build dreams, and the state of our town requires you guys and your involvement in asking questions and being part of events like today and the ones that are coming up in the next few weeks. There is a handful of different forums that are happening with some of the speakers that are here tonight. We also have the candidates night coming up. So appreciate you guys being a part of this. And we're gonna draw our winner for the raffle for the Business of the Year ticket. Please join us. We'd love to have you right back here in this room, May 14th. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.